So you are coming to Bali. In this video, I'm gonna explain 14 things you should know before coming to Bali, Indonesia. Bali, Indonesia is the perfect place to spend time as a digital nomad, but there are certainly some things you need to keep in mind, and that's why we're gonna dive into number 1. Number 1 is to always withdraw cash from an ATM attached to a bank. These banks have 24-hour security, so the chances of these ATMs being scammed are really small. A small tip, these ATMs first deliver your cash and after it they deliver your card. This is where I messed up in the beginning. I got my cash, I walked away and I forgot my card. This is something you shouldn't forget because in most of the countries you first get your card and then the cash, so you have to keep this in mind when you're withdrawing in Bali. Number 2 is that you will need to accept that you definitely need a scooter here in Bali. It's simply the best way to get around. So I will help you out, and in this description I will put the number of the best contact I have to rent a bike here. And if you cannot drive a bike, I would definitely recommend to take driving lessons in the area. I know in Canggu there are lots of companies where you can have cheap driving lessons and you will learn it very quickly. Tip number 3, if you are traveling long distance, if you go for example from South Bali to North Bali, I would recommend taking a car because those distances are simply too far to drive with your bike and you will be completely exhausted. So in this description I will put again the number of the contact that has car company, and she can drive you around everywhere and she's a really good company to travel with. Then number 4 is to be prepared for Bali belly. Bali belly is traveler's diarrhea. It can cause by consuming contaminated food or water. This is something that I had before and I felt horrible. It's something you don't want to have, so you can avoid this by just drinking water from a bottle and not from the tap. Don't touch the water from the tap at all. When you're eating street food, your body is exposed to new and unfamiliar bacteria and viruses, and that's why you can feel very sick. After contamination, it can take between 2 or 5 hours for symptoms to appear, and your first symptom might be all of a sudden that you have a rambling stomach, that your stomach is bloated, or you feel very nauseous and you will have to go to the toilet. The best way to get rid of Bali belly is to use charcoal pills. You can get them in almost any convenience store around Bali and they're quite cheap and they work perfectly. It's simply magic. And also coconut water is the best way to heal from Bali belly. So these are my 2 tips to get rid of Bali belly, and please be careful because you don't want to get this. Number 5 is to always bring a little bit of cash with you before you arrive in Bali, because you will find yourself in situations where you need to pay someone immediately, and most of the times you have to pay in cash. So for example, when you have to pay your taxi from the airport to your accommodation, it's super nice to already have some cash and not be worried about it when you just arrive, because you will probably already have enough stress when you just get out of the plane and you arrive in a completely different world. Then number 6 is to download the 2 apps GOJEK and Grab. These apps will save your life. It's from ordering food to being a cab to bring you everything you want from a store. They're literally amazing and I use them for almost everything. It's super cheap. When you want a coffee, you use it. When you want to have a drive somewhere, it's the best app possible, and it's all very cheap there as well. Number 7 is to buy enough sunscreen and mosquito repellent, because these are the only things that are super expensive here in Bali. I have no idea why, but they are way more expensive than, for example, in the Netherlands. So I brought a lot of it here. Now I run out of it, so I have to buy them every single time. But 1 bottle of sunscreen is around 6 or 7 euros, which is super expensive comparing to where I'm coming from. So that's definitely a tip, to take them enough with you. Then a really important one is to always pay respect to the locals. I see this happening all the time here in Bali. There are so many digital nomads here that we forget that we live in a different island because there is this Western culture of all people from all over the world, but we are still visitors, and Bali has this really rich culture with their own beliefs and their own traditions. And for example, it's really rude to step on the offerings that Balinese people make because those are offerings to the gods and it's super special, and I see tourists stepping on them all the time or driving over them, so please be careful and pay your respect. Then number 9 is to make sure you bring an international driving license. This is something that you can get for really cheap, but I'm sure with a small Google search you can find out how you can get international driving license in your country. Then number 10 is super important, is that you will need a very good travel insurance because accidents happen very fast here in Bali. I've seen a lot of my friends already having their first motorbike accident, and the scars that they had are no joke. So be prepared because things can be super expensive here in the hospital and the healthcare is not very good. So you will need to have a good travel insurance, and this is something you can definitely search for on Google or call with someone you know and ask them for advice, because in every country it's different, but definitely make sure you have one before you come to Bali. Number 11 is that you will need the right vaccinations before coming to Bali. This is something that is different for every country. So in the description I put down the link of Bali.com where you can exactly see what kind of vaccines you need before coming to this beautiful island. Then number 12 is that you will need a PCR test to enter Indonesia, and you will also need a B211A visa, which is a business visa. You cannot come into Bali at the moment with a tourism visa, which is quite unfortunate, but it's simply the rule now with everything going on with COVID. So that's why you will need to have those two things, and you will also need to quarantine in Jakarta for 5 days. It's not very sure how long this is gonna take, but for now this is the procedure to come into Bali. So my 13th tip is that if I were you, I would get an accommodation for the first week. You can easily book this on booking.com or somewhere else, like a website that you trust, because this is super important. I got scammed in my first week here in Bali because I trusted a stranger. So it's always the best to book at a place you trust and then see for yourself. You can travel around here and go and look to the houses and actually talk to the owners, which is always more safe than doing things over the internet. And then last but not least, I would definitely recommend before coming to Bali to learn a little bit Bahasa Indonesia. This is something that will be deeply appreciated by the locals and you will stand out because if you only try, they will love it. So it's definitely a tip and you will get a lot of smiling faces for doing this. So these were my 14 things you should know before coming to Bali, Indonesia. I really hope you found this helpful, and please do not forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in my next one.